The hospital lights glowed soft and cold, humming faintly in the silence of the late night. Machines beeped in rhythm, each sound like a reminder that life was fragile. The old woman, Margaret, lay in her bed, her chest rising and falling quickly. She had been brought in just an hour earlier, pale and trembling, her body fighting against time. Her wrinkled hands gripped the blanket as if holding on to something invisible. Dr. Michael entered the room swiftly. His white coat moved with him like a banner of duty, and the stethoscope around his neck reflected the light. He had been trained for moments like this, moments where every second mattered. His eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the monitors, reading her condition faster than words could describe. But before he could begin, Margaret's eyes widened. Her face twisted with disbelief, then anger. Her trembling hand shot up, pointing straight at him. "No, no!" she cried out, her voice filled with both fear and stubbornness. "I want a white doctor. Get me a white doctor." The words cut through the air like a blade. The nurse at the side froze. For a moment, the room was silent except for the steady beeping of the machine. Michael did not move, but his heart tightened. He had heard such things before in his life, but not at a moment this urgent. He wanted to respond, to defend himself, but Margaret's weak body betrayed her hate. The very life she wanted to protect was slipping away as she shouted against the man who had come to save her. Michael inhaled slowly. His voice was calm, though inside he carried the weight of anger and sadness. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I am your doctor tonight. If we waste time, you may not have another chance." But Margaret shook her head, her eyes blazing, her mouth twisting with the old prejudice she carried. "No, I said no." "Someone else. I will not let." Her words broke off into a cough, harsh and painful. The nurse tried to calm her. "Please, Mrs. Margaret, let him help you. You don't have time." But Margaret's fear and anger did not let go. She pressed her back against the bed as if hiding from the very man standing in front of her. Michael's jaw tightened. For a moment he thought of stepping back, of letting her drown in her own choice. But he remembered his oath, the promise he had made long ago, to save lives no matter who, no matter what. He leaned forward, his eyes steady, his voice firm. "I don't need your permission to save your life. I only need your pulse." Without waiting for more protests, Michael's hands moved. His fingers pressed against her wrist, finding the weak rhythm of her heart. He gave quick instructions to the nurse: oxygen, 4-line, cardiac monitor adjustments. His voice was sharp, commanding. A leader in a battlefield where seconds were the bullets and minutes were death. Margaret struggled weakly, but her body betrayed her anger. Her lips moved, whispering curses under her breath, but her breath was growing weaker. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, not just with hate now, but with the shadow of fear, the fear that the end was coming. Michael worked with precision. His hands knew the dance of survival, the steps of medicine that he had mastered over years of sacrifice. Every push of medicine, every adjustment of the machine, every press of his hand was not just science. It was his will to protect. As the minutes passed, the room changed. The beeping of the machine steadied. The shallow breaths of Margaret grew deeper. Color returned faintly to her cheeks. Her body, once fighting against the hands that saved her, now quietly gave in to the healing. Michael stepped back at last, sweat on his forehead, his chest rising and falling. His eyes locked on the old woman. She lay still, her chest moving slower, her face calmer, though her eyes still carried the storm of prejudice. He had done it. He had pulled her back from the edge of the dark, but she did not thank him. Instead, as her lips parted, her weak voice returned, shaking and bitter. "I told you, I wanted a white doctor," the nurse gasped softly. Michael did not flinch. He had heard enough. He turned his eyes away, not with defeat, but with quiet strength. He knew what he had done. He had fought the unexpected war, the war not just against death, but against hate itself. The night outside was silent, but inside, the battle lines had been drawn. Margaret's life had been saved, yet her heart remained chained. And Michael knew. This was only the beginning. The night outside the hospital deepened, but inside Margaret's room, the air was heavy. Machines beeped quietly, a steady reminder of the thin line between life and death. Margaret rested against the pillows, her eyes closed, her breath shallow but steady. The nurse adjusted the foredrip, glancing nervously between her patient and the doctor. Michael stood near the foot of the bed, arms folded, his face unreadable. His mind replayed Margaret's words again and again. He had faced rejection before, but this was different. He had saved her life, poured every ounce of skill and effort into keeping her heart beating, and yet she saw only the color of his skin. Margaret opened her eyes slowly. The shadows of the room danced across her pale face. She turned her head toward him, and the fire returned to her gaze. "Why are you still here?" she whispered, her voice scratchy but filled with venom. "I told you, I don't want you. I don't trust you. Bring me someone else." Michael did not respond right away. He let the silence linger, let the sound of her own heartbeat fill the void. Then, calmly he said, "You are alive because of me. You don't have to trust me, but your body already does." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Her pride clashed with the truth she could not deny. Her body was still trembling, but the strength of her anger seemed stronger than her frailty. She pointed a weak finger at him. "You think saving me makes you my hero? You think I'll thank you?" Michael shook his head slowly. "I don't want your thanks. I want you to live. That's all." The nurse looked between them, her hands frozen in place, unsure if she should intervene. The tension in the room felt heavier than the weight of the machines. Margaret scoffed, a bitter sound that cracked through her throat. "If I die, at least it won't be your hands that touched me." Michael's jaw tightened. For a moment, he felt the sting of her words like poison. But then he remembered something, his father's voice from years ago, telling him, "Hate is heavy, son. Don't let it weigh you down. Save who you can, and let the truth speak louder than their hate." He stepped closer to the bed, his presence strong but calm. "Whether you like it or not, Mrs. Margaret, my hands already saved you. That truth will never change." Her eyes widened. She wanted to argue, wanted to spit out more venom, but her breath caught in her chest. She gasped suddenly, clutching at her chest with her frail hands. The monitors screamed, the rhythm of her heart stumbled again. "Code Blue!" Michael barked, his voice sharp. The nurse jumped into action, rushing to prepare emergency tools. Michael was already at her side, his hands steady, his mind focused. Margaret's eyes darted around, filled with fear, now not anger, not hate, just fear. "Stay with me," Michael shouted, pressing his hands to her chest, beginning compressions. The nurse moved quickly, attaching the defibrillator pads, preparing. "Adrenaline," Margaret's weak voice whispered through her gasps. "No, not you." But her body was betraying her again, giving into the shadow of death. Michael ignored her words. His eyes locked on the monitor, his hands moving with relentless rhythm. He counted each compression, each breath, his focus sharper. Then steel. The room filled with urgency, the sound of alarms, the scent of adrenaline, the hum of machines fighting for life. The defibrillator charged. "Clear," the nurse called out. Margaret's body jolted under the shock, her frame trembling. Against the bed, the monitor blipped, then steadied for a brief moment. Michael leaned closer, sweat dripping down his temple. He continued the fight, his hands refusing to stop. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then at last the monitor caught a rhythm. A slow, fragile, but steady rhythm. Margaret gasped, her chest rising again with breath. The nurse sighed in relief. Michael leaned back, his hands falling to his sides. He was exhausted, but his eyes remained steady, locked on the woman who had tried to reject him even as he gave her back her life. Twice in the same night, Margaret stared at him with wide eyes. But this time, the fire of hate was not there. What she felt now was something else, something she could not name. For the first time, she saw not the color of his skin, but the strength of his hands. And deep in her heart, though her lips refused to admit it, she knew the truth. Asterisk. The silence after the storm was heavy. Margaret lay weakly against the pillows, her chest rising and falling as though each breath was borrowed. The beeping of the monitors had calmed, though the sound was still sharp in the quiet room. Her eyes blinked open slowly, and for a moment, she did not speak. Michael stood near her bed again, his gloves still on, his coat slightly wrinkled from the fight to save her. His chest rose with slow breaths, his heart still racing. He had brought her back once more. But he wondered, how many times will I have to fight, not just for her life, but against her hate? Margaret finally whispered, her voice hoarse, Why do you keep saving me?" Michael looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because that's what I do, because life matters." She frowned, confused. Her pride was strong, but her body too weak to argue the way she wanted. She turned her face away, staring at the machines instead of him. "I don't deserve it," she muttered. Nurse, who had been silent until now, spoke gently. "No one deserves to die when they can be saved. Mrs. Margaret, Dr. Michael doesn't care about your anger. He cares about keeping you alive." Margaret's lips trembled. She wanted to protest, but no words came. Deep inside, something stirred, something she had buried under years of prejudice. But she pushed it away, clinging to her old beliefs like a shield. Michael checked the 4 and adjusted the monitor again. His hands were gentle, but precise. "You don't have to like me," he said quietly, "but you will live. And that is enough." Margaret closed her eyes, pretending to sleep, but the nurse saw the tears gathering at the corner of her eyes. Hours passed. The night shifted into dawn. Pale light began to slip through the hospital blinds, painting the room in soft gold. The nurse stepped out for a moment to gather supplies, leaving Michael and Margaret alone. Margaret opened her eyes again. Her voice was softer now, almost childlike. "Why did you become a doctor?" she asked suddenly. Michael paused, caught off guard by the question. He looked at her carefully, then pulled up a chair and sat near the bed. "Because when I was a boy, I saw my mother get sick. The doctor who saved her life showed me what it means to fight for someone. I wanted to give that gift to others. That's why." Margaret studied him. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She could hear the truth in them. For a moment, her anger seemed to fade, but old habits die hard. Her eyes narrowed again. "Your skin. It reminds me of things I was taught, things I believed all my life. My father told me, people like you were not to be trusted." Michael leaned forward, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Your father taught you fear. But fear doesn't heal. Hate doesn't heal. I just saved your life twice tonight. Does that look like hate to you?" Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time, her mind did not have an answer. The nurse returned, carrying a tray. She smiled lightly at Margaret. "You're lucky, you know. Many patients don't get a second chance. You've had 2 in one night." Margaret turned her head toward Michael again, her face tight with conflict. Deep inside, a war was happening, a war between the beliefs she had carried for decades and the truth standing right before her eyes. Michael stood, preparing to leave the room for a moment. "Rest now. I'll be nearby if you need me." As he turned toward the door, Margaret's voice, weak but sharp, broke the silence. "I didn't ask you to save me." Michael paused. His back was to her, but his words were clear. "You didn't have to ask. I chose to." And with that, he stepped out, leaving Margaret staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. For the first time in her long life, doubt had entered her heart. The morning sun crept higher, flooding the hospital halls with pale gold. Nurses hurried past with charts, carts rolled by, and the smell of disinfectant hung in the air. Yet inside Margaret's room, time felt slower, heavier. She sat half upright in her bed, staring at the blinds, her wrinkled hands clutching the blanket. Her body was weak, but her mind was louder than ever. The words of the doctor echoed inside her head. You didn't have to ask, I chose to. She hated how they stuck with her. She hated how calm he was, how steady his voice sounded. For years she had believed people like him were not to be trusted, yet he had been the only one standing between her and death. The door opened softly. Michael stepped back in, holding her chart. His coat was fresh now, his face composed. He looked at her like any other patient, not with anger, not with pity, but with professional calm. Your heart is weak, he said as he studied the chart. But you're stable now. We'll keep monitoring you. Margaret swallowed, her throat dry. She wanted to argue, to throw his words back at him, but her body betrayed her again. Her voice came out softer than she expected. Why me? Why save me? Michael set the chart aside and looked directly at her. Because I see a life. I don't see the color of your skin or the anger in your words. I see a human being who needs help. That is enough for me. Her lips trembled. She turned her face away, ashamed of the wetness in her eyes. For decades she had mocked, hated, and turned her back on people like him. And now here he was saving her again and again, without complaint. The nurse entered with a tray of breakfast. She smiled warmly. Here you go, Mrs. Margaret. Eat something. It'll help you get your strength back. Margaret nodded weakly, but her eyes stayed fixed on Michael. Something inside her cracked further when she realized he hadn't left her side all night. While others rested, he had stayed, watching, protecting, ready if her heart faltered again. As the nurse left, Margaret finally whispered, almost to herself, I was wrong. Michael raised an eyebrow but did not speak. Her voice shook. All my life, I thought you're kind, I thought. She stopped, ashamed of how easily the words used to come, but how heavy they felt now. Michael leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm, but steady, like steel. Hate is learned. But so is respect. You don't have to change in one moment. But you can start. Margaret stared at him, her eyes wide. His words did not feel like an attack. They felt like a lifeline. And it terrified her. She shook her head slowly. I don't know how. Michael stood, adjusting his coat. You don't need to know how. You just need to try. The rest will come. The silence stretched between them. For the first time in many years, Margaret did not feel proud of her anger. She felt small, weak, and uncertain. When Michael turned to leave, she surprised herself. Doctor. She called out softly. He stopped at the door and looked back. Her lips trembled. She wanted to say thank you. She wanted to admit the truth building inside her. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, all she managed was, don't go too far. Michael's expression did not change, but in his eyes, there was the smallest flicker of understanding. He gave a short nod and stepped out, leaving her with the weight of her own thoughts. For the first time in her life, Margaret felt the ground of her beliefs shifting. The war inside her had only just begun. The day stretched long inside the hospital. Visitors came and went from other rooms, but Margaret's bed stayed quiet. She sat with her breakfast tray half eaten, staring at the untouched food as if it carried the weight of her guilt. Her mind would not rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the doctor's hands pressing on her chest, heard his calm voice telling her to stay alive, remembered how he had stood between her and the shadow of death. No one else had come. No family. No friends. Only him. In the afternoon, Michael returned for his rounds. He walked in with his usual calm, carrying her chart. His voice was professional. "Your heartbeat has steadied. The medication is working." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Her lips parted, but she hesitated. At last, the words slipped out, fragile and uneven. "Why don't you hate me?" Michael froze slightly, then looked at her carefully. "Why would I waste my energy hating you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I've said terrible things. I've spent my life thinking people like you didn't belong near me. But you saved me twice. Why?" Michael pulled the chair closer and sat. His voice was low, calm but firm. "Because hate never healed anyone. Because if I let your words stop me, you would not be alive to ask me this question. I don't need your approval, Margaret. I need you to live." Her breath caught. The truth in his words cut through her. Defenses like light in darkness. But before she could reply, her body suddenly stiffened. Her chest rose sharply. The monitor alarm blared. Her heart had slipped again into a dangerous rhythm. "Not again," the nurse whispered as she rushed in. But Michael was already at Margaret's side. Margaret gasped, clutching Michael's sleeve. This time not pushing him away, but holding on. "Don't. Let me go," she whispered weakly. Michael's hand pressed firmly on her wrist. His voice was strong. "I won't. Stay with me." The nurse handed him the prepared syringe, and he injected the medicine swiftly. The monitor flickered. For seconds nothing changed. Margaret's eyes rolled back, her body trembling. Michael leaned closer, his voice urgent. "Fight. You've fought me all night now. Fight for yourself." The machine beeped, erratic but slowing into rhythm. Margaret gasped and coughed, her body sinking back onto the bed. Slowly, her color returned. When she opened her eyes again, she was crying. Her hand was still clutching Michael's sleeve. She looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice shaking. "All my life, I was wrong about you, about everything." Michael's eyes softened. He gently placed her hand back on the blanket. "Rest, words can come later. Your strength matters now." But Margaret shook her head weakly. "No. I need to say it. Thank you. For saving me when I didn't deserve it. For not giving up on me." For a moment, the room was silent except for the steady heartbeat on the monitor. The nurse wiped her eyes quietly. Michael stood, his expression calm, but his voice carried quiet strength. "You don't owe me thanks, Margaret. You owe yourself a chance to live differently than before. Don't waste it." Margaret's tears fell freely now. She had spent her life wrapped in hate, and in a single night, the very man she rejected had become her only hope. For the first time, her heart felt lighter, not just from survival, but from the truth pressing inside her chest. She had been wrong. She had been blind. And she knew she would never see the world the same way again. The second night in the hospital was quiet. The hallway lights dimmed, and the world outside grew still. Inside her room, Margaret lay awake, her mind filled with thoughts she had never allowed before. She stared at the ceiling, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly. But this time, they did not tremble from fear. They trembled from change. Michael entered softly, checking her chart, adjusting the monitor. His movements were calm, steady, professional, just as they had been from the start. But to Margaret, he no longer looked the same. The coat was the same, the face the same, but what she saw now was different. She saw the man who had chosen her life over her hate. "Your vitals are stronger tonight," Michael said gently. "You're healing." Margaret swallowed, her throat tight. "Doctor, I don't know how to say this." Michael glanced at her. "Say what you can." Her eyes filled with tears. "All my life, I thought people like you were beneath me. I thought you didn't belong near me, near my family, near my life. I was cruel, I was blind. And still, you saved me. Twice. You showed me more humanity in one night than I've shown in a lifetime." Michael stood quietly, listening. Margaret's voice broke. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. I don't deserve your kindness, but thank you for giving me back my life." For the first time, Michael's expression softened into a small smile. His voice was calm, but there was warmth in it now. "Everyone deserves a chance to change. Even you, Margaret. Maybe saving your life wasn't just about your heartbeat, it was about waking up your heart." Her tears fell freely. She reached out her hand, weak but trembling with sincerity. Slowly, Michael took it. The contact was gentle, firm, steady. For the first time in her life, she held the hand of a black man not with fear, not with hate, but with gratitude. The nurse stepped in quietly and froze, watching the moment unfold. She smiled softly, as though witnessing something rare and precious. Margaret's lips trembled as she whispered, "I was saved by the man I once hated most, and that truth, it leaves me speechless." Michael released her hand gently. "Then, let it speak for you. Change doesn't need words, it needs action. Live differently than before. That's the thanks I want." Margaret closed her eyes, tears still wet on her cheeks, but her heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time in many years she felt peace, not because she had lived through another night, but because she had finally seen the truth about humanity. As Michael left the room, the nurse whispered to him, "Doctor, I think you saved more than her body tonight." Michael nodded quietly. Sometimes healing is bigger than medicine. And in that quiet hospital room, a life had been saved, not just from death, but from hate itself.